One teacher's laugh nearly crushed a kid's pride, but the truth walked in wearing a NASA badge. You ever have a moment that just hangs in the air like a bad smell? Something said that instantly shifts the energy in a room? That's exactly what happened at Prescott Elementary, right there in Ms. Worthington's third-grade classroom in Chandler, Arizona. It was career week, one of those annual events where kids sit cross-legged on a reading rug while parents parade and holding up props like stethoscopes, hard hats, or laptops. Some kids beamed with pride. Others shrank into themselves. But everyone looked forward to it. It broke the rhythm of spelling tests and times tables. 8-year-old Jalen Brooks was practically bouncing in his seat that morning. Small for his age but sharp as a tack, he had this wide-eyed way of talking like every word mattered. And today, every word did. His dad was supposed to show up later that afternoon. So when Mr. Charles Denton asked the class to go around and share what their parents did for work, Jalen sat up straight like he'd been rehearsing for days. "My dad," he said, chest puffed out, "works at NASA." There was a pause. Not the kind where people are confused, the kind where they don't believe you. One kid let out a snort. Another whispered, "Yeah, right." But it was the teacher's reaction that hit the hardest. Mr. Denton, early 40s, thinning hair, khakis, and a tucked-in polo, chuckled. It wasn't a belly laugh. It was that low, dismissive kind, the kind that makes you feel smaller than you already are. "NASA, huh?" he said, raising his eyebrows like Jalen just claimed his dad built rocket ships in the backyard. "That's quite the imagination, Jalen. Maybe next time we aim for something more realistic." A few kids giggled. One girl even repeated it under her breath, "More realistic." Like it was a joke they were all in on. Jalen didn't say another word. He just stared down at the rug, his sneakers tapping together, his hands, animated just moments before, now curled into small fists on his lap. Mr. Denton moved on. He didn't pause to notice the way Jalen's shoulders sank or how quiet he suddenly became. But one person did. Mila Nguyen, who sat next to Jalen, leaned in and whispered, "I believe you." He didn't answer. Just nodded slightly, eyes still fixed on the floor. The rest of the morning blurred past. Jacob's dad was a firefighter. Chloe's mom ran a bakery. Parents came and went, clapped for, thanked, hugged. But Jalen just sat there trying to disappear into the carpet. At lunch, he barely touched his sandwich. Didn't laugh when the other boys started doing silly dances by the vending machines. Didn't race for the swings like he usually did. Because something about that moment stuck. Not just the laugh. Not even the doubt. It was the ease of it. How quickly a grown man, someone meant to encourage him, wrote him off without a second thought. But what Mr. Denton didn't know was this: Jalen wasn't guessing. He wasn't exaggerating. He hadn't made it up because it sounded cool. Everything he said was true. His father was an aerospace engineer. He'd been working on a Mars communications relay project for the past year. He wore a NASA badge every day. And more than that, he was proud of it. So was Jalen. 3 days before career week, Jalen was in the garage with his dad helping clean out bins of old cables and wires. Well, mostly just watching. He sat on an overturned milk crate with a Capri Sun in one hand and a question ready every 2 minutes. Wait, so the rover has to wait how long to send a message back to Earth? Dr. Kelvin Brooks didn't even look up from the tangle of wiring in his hands. Depending on where Mars is in orbit, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. Jalen's eyes widened. So it's like texting someone with really bad service? Kelvin laughed. Exactly like that. Space has terrible Wi-Fi. That was Jalen's favorite kind of time, the simple kind. No big speeches. No complicated lessons. Just small moments with his dad where science became funny and hard stuff made sense because someone was willing to explain it. Dr. Brooks was the kind of man who could make a room pause just by walking in. But at home, he was soft-spoken. His hands were always either typing, holding a tool, or resting on Jalen's shoulders. His work was intense, wires, systems, equations. But when it came to his son, he made sure to break it all down so even a third grader could feel smart. At bedtime, Jalen brought one of the NASA folders from his dad's desk into his room. He laid it on the bed like it was treasure. "Can I show them this at school?" he asked. Kelvin looked at the folder. "I don't think I'm allowed to bring classified stuff into show and tell, buddy. Not even one little page?" Kelvin sat down beside him. "You don't need the folder. All you need is your voice. Just tell them what I do. And tell them you're proud." Jalen hesitated. "What if they don't believe me?" Kelvin leaned back on one elbow. He wasn't one for sugarcoating. He knew what the world could be like, especially for boys who looked like his son. "If they laugh," he said, "you keep your head up. And remember that the truth don't need applause. It just needs to be said." That night, Jalen wrote down everything he wanted to say during career week. He scribbled words like orbit, spacecraft, and Mars relay in bubble letters. Drew a picture of his dad holding Earth in one hand and a satellite in the other. He couldn't wait to tell his class. Couldn't wait to finally show them who his dad really was. He even practiced it in front of the bathroom mirror that morning. Pointed like his dad did when he explained how things worked. Even threw in a joke about space Wi-Fi. But none of that mattered the moment Mr. Denton laughed. At lunch that day back at school, Jalen didn't tell anyone what he had prepared. He ripped up the picture before recess. Crumpled it and shoved it into the bottom of his backpack. It's strange, the way excitement can collapse into embarrassment in less than a second. One moment you're on top of the world. The next, you're counting the minutes until you can go home and forget any of it happened. Kelvin didn't know any of this yet. He had been in back-to-back meetings all morning, prepping a slideshow he planned to show the class. Something fun. Kid-friendly. There were cartoons of rockets and pictures of Mars. But his favorite slide was the last one. It was a photo of him and Jalen at the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. Both wearing matching badges and grinning ear to ear. But back at Prescott Elementary, Jalen wasn't grinning anymore. Because sometimes all it takes is one comment from the wrong person to make a kid start questioning everything. The rest of the day dragged. After lunch, Mr. Denton tried to slip back into his usual rhythm like nothing awkward had happened earlier. He went through spelling words. Reviewed math problems. But every now and then he glanced at Jalen. And Jalen never looked back. Jalen wasn't pouting. He wasn't crying. He just went quiet in a way that didn't belong to someone his age. Like something in him had shut off for the day. Mila noticed. So did a couple of other kids. But nobody said anything. Maybe they didn't know how. Career presentations were scheduled for the last hour of the day. So as 1:30 rolled around, Mr. Denton started lining the desks up in rows, moving the whiteboard easel to the front. The parents would wait outside the classroom and be called in one by one. Jalen watched the clock more than he watched the presentations. First came Chloe's mom, who brought in cupcakes and handed out little cookie-shaped business cards from her bakery. Then Thomas's uncle, a mechanic, showed up with a tire pressure gauge and passed it around the room like it was treasure. Kids clapped, laughed, asked questions. And all Jalen could do was sit in his seat, palms sweaty, knees bouncing, hoping, begging, praying that his dad didn't get stuck in traffic or forget or cancel. Because if Mr. Denton saw him walk in wearing a real NASA badge, maybe he'd finally understand. But underneath all that hope was doubt. That ugly kind that doesn't ask questions, it just whispers things that hurt. What if he doesn't show up? What if Mr. Denton was right? What if my dad's not who I think he is? Jalen shook his head like he could knock the thoughts loose. Meanwhile, Mr. Denton stood near the door, clipboard in hand, occasionally stepping out to wave in the next parent. He was in his element again, smiling, leading, cracking safe little jokes. But something about him had shifted. When he called on other kids, he glanced at Jalen once or twice. His jaw worked like he had something he wanted to say, but the words kept catching somewhere behind his teeth. Maybe he knew he had gone too far. Maybe it hit him when he saw how flat Jalen went after that comment. But he didn't apologize. Not then. Instead, he just kept the show rolling. 15 minutes left. 4 parents to go. Jalen checked the door every few seconds now. Waiting to see his dad's silhouette. The tie. The suit jacket. The slow, steady walk. He imagined it like a movie in his head. Only now, he wasn't so sure how it would end. "All right," Mr. Denton said, glancing at his list. "Up next we have..." He stopped mid-sentence. Because the door had already opened. And there he was. Dr. Kelvin Brooks stepped into the room in a navy blue blazer, white shirt, slacks, and that familiar NASA badge clipped just below his breast pocket. His hair was trimmed close, peppered at the temples. His eyes scanned the room once, then landed on his son. Jalen sat up so fast his chair made a noise against the tile. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Kelvin gave a slight nod. No big smiles yet. Just a calm, steady presence. "Hello," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm Dr. Brooks. I design spacecraft." And just like that, the room froze. Not with laughter. Not with confusion. With realization. But one person in that room wasn't ready to process what just happened. And he was standing at the front holding a clipboard he suddenly didn't want anymore. Mr. Denton blinked, lips parting slightly as if to say something, but nothing came out. He cleared his throat instead and forced a polite smile. Welcome, Dr. Brooks. Please, go ahead." Kelvin nodded once more, his voice steady and clear as he stepped to the front. He set down a small black case on the teacher's desk and opened it with practiced ease. Out came a tablet, a small model of a Mars rover, and a laminated diagram of the Deep Space Network. The room was utterly silent. "I work with NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory," Kelvin began, "where we help create systems that allow spacecraft to communicate with Earth, even from as far as Mars." He held up the rover model. "This little guy here is a replica of what we sent to explore Mars. And this," he gestured to the diagram, "is how we hear back from it. We build systems that listen to whispers across space. Which means, when a robot says, 'I found something cool on another planet,' my job is to make sure we hear it." A collective "whoa" rippled through the classroom. Even the kids who had been skeptical earlier now leaned in, wide-eyed. Fingers shot into the air. Does it ever break? What happens if it gets lost? Have you been to space? Kelvin chuckled softly at that last one. Nope. Not yet. My feet stay on Earth. But my work? My work goes everywhere. Then he turned slightly, his gaze finding Jalen again. But the best part of my job isn't the science. It's sharing it. With kids like my son, who could probably explain half this stuff better than me. Jalen sat taller. His heart thudded in his chest, and for the first time all day, the knot in his stomach started to unravel. Mila nudged him and whispered, "Told you." Mr. Denton stood stiffly off to the side now, arms folded loosely, the clipboard hanging uselessly from his fingertips. His eyes flicked between Kelvin's NASA badge and Jalen's beaming face. The realization had settled in heavy and hot. He'd laughed at the wrong kid. When Kelvin finished answering questions, he wrapped up with a simple sentence: "Science isn't just something for labs and TV shows. It's something real people do, every day, and anyone can be part of it." Especially you. He stepped back, packed up his model, and turned to shake Mr. Denton's hand. The teacher hesitated, then took it, face tight, eyes not quite meeting Kelvin's. "Thank you for coming," he mumbled. Kelvin just nodded. As he left, he gave Jalen a wink, subtle, just for him. Then he was gone. But the silence that followed was loud. Mr. Denton stood in front of the class again, but his usual confidence had cracked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Looked at Jalen. Paused. And then, finally, he spoke. "Jalen," he said, voice quieter now, "I owe you an apology." The whole room turned toward them. Jalen blinked. "I shouldn't have dismissed what you said earlier," Mr. Denton continued. "That was wrong. And I'm sorry. Your dad's work is extraordinary. And you were right to be proud." Jalen didn't say anything at first. But slowly, his expression softened. He gave a small nod. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. After school, as kids filed out of the classroom, a few paused by Jalen's desk. "Your dad's job is so cool," one boy said. "That rover thing was awesome," another chimed in. Even the girl who had mocked him earlier whispered, "I didn't know he was for real." "I'm sorry." Jalen didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. He just smiled quietly, picked up his backpack, and walked out the door. Because he remembered what his dad had told him, the truth don't need applause. It just needs to be said. But sometimes, just sometimes, the truth walks in wearing a NASA badge, and leaves a room changed forever. He was standing at the front holding a clipboard he suddenly didn't want anymore. Mr. Denton's face twitched, just slightly, but enough. Enough for anyone paying attention to see the discomfort tighten in his jaw, the flush creeping into his neck. Because this wasn't just some dad who brought a toy model or a slideshow with silly sound effects. This was the real thing. A man who made the stars a workplace. A man who carried the weight of proof in his badge, in his presence, and most of all, in the quiet pride beaming from his son's eyes. Dr. Brooks walked to the front of the room with the same calm energy he carried into NASA command centers. He didn't need to demand the room's attention. He simply had it. Jalen was sitting up straighter now, his face almost unreadable, caught somewhere between pride and relief, like he was still trying to believe what was happening was real. Mila nudged him gently with her elbow, a quiet "I told you so" that he didn't mind one bit. Kelvin opened his laptop, connected it to the projector, and said, "I'm not going to talk at you like a lecture. I'm going to show you what I do. And I want you to ask questions. Big ones. Wild ones. Even weird ones. Because space is full of questions, and that's why I love it." The lights dimmed. The first slide clicked into place, a rocket launching. The kids gasped in unison, little mouths shaped into O's as the smoke and fire filled the screen. "That's from the Artemis program," Dr. Brooks said. "We're preparing to send people back to the moon, and eventually, to Mars." Next came animations of satellites orbiting planets, maps of Mars terrain, and photos from inside the Jet Propulsion Lab. But the one that made the room truly silent was the last slide, the one Dr. Brooks had been waiting for. It was the picture, him and Jalen, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of a life-size model of a Mars rover. Both grinning like the universe was their playground. Kelvin turned to the class. "I love my job. But not because of the rockets or the machines. I love it because I get to solve hard problems with people who never stop dreaming. And I share it with my son, because I want him to know that big dreams aren't something you grow out of. They're something you grow into." The room was dead silent. Then, slowly, like the moment needed time to breathe, applause started. First from Mila. Then from Thomas. Then the whole room erupted. Even the quietest kids were clapping. Even some of the parents who had stayed behind peered through the door, wide-eyed. And Jalen? He didn't clap. He just sat there, hands on his desk, eyes glassy, smile steady. He didn't need to clap. The applause was all ready for him. Mr. Denton cleared his throat. Twice. Then said, "Thank you, Dr. Brooks. That was extraordinary." His voice cracked slightly, and he looked like he had more to say, but didn't quite know how. Or maybe he did, but didn't have the courage. As the parents and kids gathered around Dr. Brooks with their questions, what's Mars smell like? Can a rover break down? Do aliens email? Mr. Denton walked over to Jalen's desk. He bent slightly, quiet so only the boy could hear. "I owe you an apology, Jalen," he said. "You were telling the truth. And I was wrong to doubt you." Jalen looked up at him. Not angry. Not smug. Just calm. Then he nodded once and said, "Okay." Mr. Denton straightened, paused, then returned to the front, where the class was still buzzing with energy. Kelvin stayed behind after the presentation, answering every question until the bell rang. Jalen stood beside him the whole time, chest out, head high, like the space between Earth and Mars had folded just for him. As they walked out together, Kelvin draped an arm around his son's shoulders. "You did good, kid." "I didn't do anything," Jalen said, shrugging. Kelvin smiled. "You held your truth. That's harder than it looks." Later that night, Jalen sat on his bed with the torn-up drawing from earlier, piecing it back together with tape. It didn't look perfect anymore, but somehow, it felt even more powerful that way. Like it had been through something. Like he had been through something. And downstairs, on Kelvin's desk, sat a new drawing Jalen had made. One where the Earth wasn't in his dad's hand anymore. This time, it was in his. Sometimes, a laugh can echo louder than a shout. But truth. Truth walks in quietly. Confidently. Wearing a badge that doesn't need defending. And in that third-grade classroom in Chandler, Arizona, one little boy learned that truth, and the stars, belonged to him, too.